I went and really searched out, were people doing this, and found they really weren't, or at least they weren't doing it in the vision I had seen. And then I went and talked to people who were working on the front lines to say, maybe the reason this doesn't exist is because it's not needed. And that was the furthest thing from the truth I could get.
Welcome to Transforming the Toddler Years, a Core 4 parenting podcast for conscious, cycle-breaking parents ready to turn toddler tantrums into teachable moments. Hi, I'm Cara Tyrrell, a lifetime lover of littles, mom to 2 grown and flown girls, and an early childhood educator. Through the show, I teach you my collaborative parenting methodology for nurturing your little human's mind, body, and spirit, because how you connect and collaborate in the first 5 years is how you raise happy, healthy kids who grow into the best version of themselves and find true success in school and life. Today's guest is a dear friend of mine and a graduate of the Transforming the Toddler Years course. Her name is Michelle, and she's the executive director and founder of the Colette Louise Tisdale Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting families facing high-risk pregnancies, NICU stays, or loss. Since 2018, the foundation has provided financial assistance to over 3,000 families. And today she's going to tell you her personal story with infertility, loss, and parenting her rainbow baby, Elliot, who's quickly approaching 5 years old and kindergarten. Michelle calls herself the taboo topics lady because she openly shares her story to break stigmas around infertility, baby loss, trauma, and grief. She is an advocate from the soul on a mission to create a world in which every parent, family, and decision is supported and empowered. So this is a really special episode. We know the statistics around loss. And if you haven't yourself experienced infant loss or miscarriage or a stay in the NICU, you're not going to have to look too far beyond your nuclear family unit to find someone who has. So please have a listen and please share with the people who really need to hear this empowering message. Michelle, welcome to the show. I am so honored to host this space so we can discuss parenting after loss.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I've always been so grateful for our friendship and our and just being able to work together. And I really appreciate having the time to talk with you about all this.
I totally agree. And what a great place to start, right? We have known each other for years. Mm-hmm. And like any cool foundation, we met in a great networking group, right, and then immediately understood that there were a couple things about our lives that were parallel. And one of them is that we had both experienced the loss of a child. So people know my story, but they don't know yours. Will you share with us about all your kids?
Sure. It was a long road of infertility. All of my babies are IVF babies. I'm a proud IVF mom. And our first sweet pea, we lost at about 8 weeks of gestation. After our first round of IVF went successfully. So kind of getting to those barriers and thinking, okay, this is just what we needed. And then to have the loss was a real whammy. And then we went back to trying, and on our third round of IVF, got pregnant with our daughter, Colette. And, pretty normal pregnancy. At 21 weeks pregnant, an intuition told me to go to the OB. And I did. And that was when my blood pressure was 188 over 110, and they sent me straight to labor and delivery to be monitored, and I was hospitalized then and told I would be there until I delivered, and ultimately spent 3 weeks in the hospital before doctors recommended delivery. So Colette was born at 24 weeks and 5 days and went straight to the NICU and spent 9 days in the NICUs with all the ups and downs before ultimately we lost her And, much like your story, right? It's this kind of shock thing of things that are not supposed to happen, right? You're not supposed to outlive your children. You're not supposed to, all of those things that happen. And then we still wanted to have kids. And so what does that look like next, and with our history? And so, really looked into it. Still to this day, I don't have any real answers as to why this happened, what could be done to prevent it in the future. And so we tried again, and I was not getting pregnant, and finally had to come to the conclusion of how absolutely terrified I was to be pregnant again. And so ultimately we used a gestational carrier for our son, Elliot, who is 4.5. He's going to be going to kindergarten in the fall. Can you believe that? I can't. And just really has been a crazy journey to do this. It's hard, right? I only have one living child. People from the outside look at it and think I have I have one child, and I don't. And that's, that's always a hard role to play.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much for sharing. Something that you said kind of lit me back up and brought me right back to the moment of knowing, even when nobody around me would believe me. And you said a moment of intuition gripped you. Can you talk more about that? It's so important that moms, especially, learn how to listen to what their body and their spirit is telling them as they're growing another baby. And I just feel like they're not empowered enough.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Listen to me, please.
For sure. I think it was interesting because I think there was always some part of me during Colette's pregnancy that knew this was not going to be a normal pregnancy, right? And so I can remember being very much wanting to take care of things early on because I knew she was going to come early. I don't know why. I just had this feeling. There was nothing in my history to make me think that, but it just was a feeling. And then when we got specifically to that date, everything kept telling me, you need to go, you need to go, you need to go. And I consider myself very lucky that I have a very good intuition and that I have learned to really listen and follow it. And so that was very helpful to me. But yeah, my husband was looking at me like I was a little bit crazy. Like, why do we have to go? The nurses from my doctor's office actually called and said, oh, you don't need to come in. And I actually fought with them and said, well, I'm coming in and I'm seeing the doctor. So I'm going to stay in your waiting room until I see the doctor. And even in doing that, there was the little part of me that was like outside of my body going, why are you being so crazy about this? Right. And yet somehow I knew I had to do this and I didn't know why. I couldn't tell you I didn't have any symptoms. But something just kept kind of propelling me like, you have to go to this appointment. You have to see this doctor. There's something, and so I think it's really just, trusting yourself and trusting your own knowledge and being willing to, here's the thing, right? My hope in going was I was going to go and it was going to be kind of like oh, well, you freaked out kind of thing, right?
Same.
And I was okay with that because I had enough worry, right? And I would love to be sitting here talking to you on a totally different topic saying, yeah, I had this intuition, I went and everything was weird and I went away. And I didn't have that experience. But being willing to say, I'm going to go have this, I'm going to go make this step forward and say this, and I'm going to keep saying it until they're running the right tests, they're doing the right things to see this. And I think that's so important. It's so important for, especially for moms, right? While caring, while we're pregnant, whatever, but even with our children as we get older, right? I think of a time where my son had strep and I knew he had strep and they're telling me it's something else. And I'm like, you need to do the strep test. And, negative comes back. They're like, well, no, he doesn't have strep. I'm like, you need to send it for the long term. Well, and then he had strep. And it's kind of one of those oh, I knew this, right? I can see this. And I think we don't trust ourselves enough to say, we do have these feelings, we do have these things. And it's better to put ourselves into the situation where we might be deemed as, sort of crazy or panicking or over worrying than to miss something and, to do this. And I think it's really just truly important to do it. And it's tough that we're in this world that people don't believe us right away and don't take that into account.
Absolutely. I remember the moment vividly when I said the same words, and on my doctor on the other side of the phone, and I was 40 weeks pregnant, right? So we were like potentially go time. And he was just like, I suppose you can come in if you really want.
Right.
That's exactly what he said to me. And I was like, well, I am coming in and I do really want, meet me there. I'll be there in 15 minutes. And that is just so valuable to step into a space of, this is my journey.
Right.
I am the one who's going to be responsible for this human being and is currently responsible for this human being. So thank you for sharing that. That's really important for people to hear. And I feel like it also informs this parenting after loss piece, because that's a whole different ball game. We don't walk into parenting the same person that we walked into the pregnancy as. And I know how defining that was for me. What was your journey like?
Yeah, I mean, I think somebody made a joke once that said, I said something and they said, well, Michelle knows every single way that a baby can be injured. And I was like, yeah, you're right, because I made sure I was prepared with all this stuff. So we followed everything to the T, right? So, people would say, oh, you could do this. This will be fine. I'm like, nope. That's not recommended. We're not doing that. And that was really important to me. And I needed all of those kinds of things in place because I needed that safety. And so I think that was something that was really big. I think it's kind of twofold. I think I am a much more laid back parent than I ever would have been without loss. Because to me, I'm like, I can't bring back my daughter, right? There's nothing to do that. But I can make sure that my son is having the best childhood possible. And I can let go of the ick and the, whatever that I would normally do. So he's messy and he's dirty and he's having fun. I can clean up a mess, right? I can't do anything else. I can clean up a mess. So, or I can learn to live with a little bit of chaos in the house. Or a lot of it, whatever that might be. I can do those kinds of things. So I think it's made me a lot more laid back in a lot of ways and a lot more cautious in a lot of ways. And so I think it's the balancing of that. And I think it's also, I think this was one of the hardest parts I had, was that there's no safety, right? And I'm sure you know this. A lot of parents would find safety in like, well, this only happens to 2% of kids. And when you find yourself that you've been in those minorities, it is really hard not to think you are always going to be in that minority. So when they say these things, there is comfort to a lot of parents about, oh, it only happens in this small percentage. And for me, it's actually a trigger because I'm like, oh, there's only this little percentage. That means my kid's going to fall into that. And that's where I'm going to be. And so it's hard to get past that. So a lot of the comforting things that are involved in just parenting go away and actually become triggers. And so that's kind of, an interesting thing. So I'm really more protective of things. And then of course I had to, right, because the universe thinks it's really funny, I had to have a baby in COVID. And so what did that look like? And so it's finding those kinds of things and realizing those kinds of things. I think it's finding the right support systems in place to do that, who are going to understand you're not always going to be logical on your thought processes, and you're going to have these fears and you're going to have these triggers, and who are willing to work with you on those. I very quickly, I let it go too long, but we switched pediatricians. Our pediatrician was very much in the when I talked to her about COVID, for example, she would tell me about all the minorities of this doesn't really affect babies. This doesn't really do this. And I said to her, finally, I said, with our history, that doesn't provide me any comfort.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, I know, and just went on. And it was that's not actually helpful, and this is actually hurting me. And so it was finally I have to find the doctor that works well for our family. And I did. And, and so she's very much looking at this, she herself is a lost mom, but even if she wasn't, very much looking at this as yes, I know the medical, but I also know all those unfounded fears and what that feels like. And so how do we merge those together, and how do we work to get this through? And I think that's the really most important thing is to know that, and to allow yourself the grace that you're going to freak out. unnecessarily at some points. And that's okay.
And just assume that you will. So you and I are unique, not unique, but you and I are aligned in the sense that we lost our first children. And I've worked with lots of parents over the years who had living babies at home when they lost a child. So the two, it's hard to say, really. Right. Nothing's easier, nothing's harder, but I can tell you 100% that when it was time to try again and we were ready to try again, I went from doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor, and I had interview questions, and I went into their offices and I asked that question. I said, I will panic. I will catastrophize. I will think on any given day that the child inside me is no longer alive and need you to bring me into the office and do a test and calm me down. Are you up for that? Like, I needed to know straight out of the gate that they weren't going to look at me the way my original doctor did. And that was important. It was a deal breaker for me if they couldn't.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that that's the important stuff is, not only is it listening to your intuition, but it's also sharing. Like, listen, this is what is going to be useful for me. Right. And like, I'm going to have all these freakouts. I'm going to have all these things that are not necessarily, from working together and knowing each other, that I had a son who didn't start talking until he was a little over 3. And I was terrified the whole time, right? And one of the things that I really put a lot on was that I didn't carry him. And so it was that the defining thing that had changed things, right? Mm-hmm. And so if I had carried him, would things be different? I had to go through a lot of that, and I had to do that. And I had to have, a pediatrician and people in my life who are like, that is not causing any of these issues, right? And, I know you did, I know lots of people did, but that was a really heavy guilt for me that I was feeling. And so to be able to say that, like, I am really struggling with some things here and there about this. And so I need you to help me along with this and not to just overanalyze, because I think there's a tendency by a lot of people who are like, oh, it's not that. I'm like, well, I think it is. And so it's really hard for me to like not feel like it is. And so I think there's a lot of that too, is finding those people who are going to take you where you're at, who are going to provide comfort, but without minimizing what you're feeling or just dismissing what you're feeling.
Right. Yeah. Permission to feel. I mean, if I could get a tattoo, that would be the one.
Right.
Permission to feel. Just that. Hey, Mama. Cara here, just hopping in to say how impressed I am by you and your dedication to raise a whole child who will be world and school ready. You know that parenting is a job, a J-O-B job, and it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to know what you don't know. And that's what I'm here for. My Transforming the Toddler Years course is currently closed, but I am accepting one-on-one clients who are looking to make massive transformation inside their home. If you're feeling overwhelmed, disconnected, and that you're in survival mode all day, every day, but you wake up determined to be intentional, calm, and connected so that you can help your child thrive, I can help. Schedule a complimentary connection call with the link in the show notes to share your parenting journey and your current struggles. Let's see how we can work together to help you transform the toddler years. So, what's also really true about people who go through this unexpected journey of being just completely broken and shattered and like having to put the pieces back together so that we can continue moving forward with some intention is that usually some type of action or vocation or passion project comes out of it. Right. And this, I like to align it with this idea of like who we are, what actions soothe us. I am a server. I like to serve people to make myself feel better. And so I started a pregnancy after loss group, right? That was how I did it. You have done something extraordinary with your love for Colette and your vision for how to support families through their darkest hours. Tell us all about
Yeah.
this.
I talked about that everything that happened was unexpected, right? I did not expect at 21 weeks pregnant to be put into the hospital. I did not expect to be told I was going to be there until I delivered. I did not expect any of it. And one of the things that I realized very quickly was the huge privilege I had of being able to financially handle that. And that was something that really struck me, and that I really started thinking how privileged and how, like, what a minority I was in to be able to say that. And then it really occurred to me, I said, we need, I told my husband after a day or two in the hospital, I said, we need to do something about this. And he sighed and said, could you please for once just think about yourself? And I said, you know who you married? And that was like our joke. But it really did just stay through in my head. And so I would sit there and think about, it wasn't just families that were already living paycheck to paycheck or were already struggling. But it was, as friends would text and call and visit, I would think about their situations and think, how long could you last if all of a sudden one day to the next you lost an income or half an income or whatever that would look like. And so that was really my driving force. And I kept thinking that throughout NICU and loss. I didn't want to start anything on my own. I'll be really honest with you. I had worked in nonprofits my whole life, and I was like, I'm not starting my own ever, ever, ever. Again, universe has a sense of humor that is very dark and very real. And so I went and really searched out, were people doing this? And found they really weren't, or at least they weren't doing it in the vision I had seen. And then I went and talked to people who were working on the front lines to say, maybe the reason this doesn't exist is because it's not needed. And that was the furthest thing from the truth I could get. I wasn't even getting like a neutral, like, yeah, I guess it's a good idea. It was a lot of just like, what can we do to make this happen? And so ultimately, I kind of had to say, I think that this is my calling. I think that this is where I've been pushed to. And so we started an organization in Colette's honor, and we provide financial assistance to families dealing with high-risk, complicated pregnancies, NICU stays, and loss. And so we launched on Colette's due date, so September 7th of 2018. And it's just been crazy to see the need and to really feel the impact. We were talking just before this that we've now helped at least one family in every state, and we've hit over 3,000 families helped. And, that's really, I think it's really powerful because it's putting meaning to our experiences, to Colette's life, and also means like her name, her memory lives on, right? There are 3,000 families that know of Colette, right? And various know more than others, but I wouldn't have been able to do that for my almost 7-year-old who had lived. And it's really making, a huge difference. And that's just a beautiful thing that I'm really passionate about and getting to do, and really seeing where families, we're all going to end up in situations like this, right? There's no like income boundaries. There's no socioeconomic, reasons. Like this happens across the board. But how many families are decimated by this financially, are decimated by this emotionally because of all of the added stress, and something we didn't have to experience.
Oh, what a beautiful calling. I mean, I love how each of us find the way to keep our kids alive. And I used to say to people, they'd be like, well, that must be so hard for you to go sit at the bedside in a hospital with someone who's just lost their child and walk them through those first hours. And I was like, that's how I parent my Emma Grace. I don't get to go to ballet recitals, and I don't get to go to school events. Like, this is how I be her mom in that moment, is by showing someone there actually is hope, and I'll believe it for you because right now you can't.
Right.
And that's so powerful. And also, I was 23 when she passed. And by the way, one of the other reasons I absolutely love this universal connection, September 7th was Emma's due date.
Oh, wow. I don't think I knew that before now.
That I remember when I read your story, I was like, oh my gosh, it was her due date.
So crazy.
And it's actually the day she passed. She was born into the world on the 8th, but she passed inside me on the 7th. And so it's just So powerful, those social spaces that you are creating for people, the community that you are, whether we want to or not, welcoming them into and saying, you didn't choose this path, but so many people have gone before you and we are here for you. And I get the financial restrictions. We couldn't afford a funeral. We were so blessed to have parents, both of us, who one donated the plot that had been reserved for her at the end of her life, and the other bought the casket and paid for the headstone. I mean, if we didn't have family who rose up to support us that way, I wouldn't have a place to go and see her and be with her.
Right. And family who had the capacity to as well, because that's the other thing. It's not just having the family who is willing to, but it's having the family who can. And I think that's the other thing too, is how does that play out and how does that look for a lot of people?
And what I really love so much is that what's permeating everything you've said over this episode is we don't know people's stories.
Right.
And it's essential to remind ourselves of that. We don't know their childhoods. We don't know their past traumas or triggers. We don't know what this loss and grief is doing, not just to mom and dad who are experiencing it, but to grandma and grandpa, great grandma who had 4 miscarriages of her own and never was allowed to talk about it. This is really big work that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And in the loss piece, I mean, I was shocked by how many people I had never known about share their losses after we lost. It's this like secret, club. I was like, shh, don't say that. And I'm really grateful to be part of a generation that I think is like, no, we're not going to hide away from this and we're going to share this. And it's still hard. I mean, I still get people who, cannot run away fast enough from me because I'm having this conversation. I'm saying these things, and like that is still hard. And yet I'm going to keep doing it because there are so many people who feel like they can't. Right. And that's really what motivates me is the people who, I have a big mouth. I'll keep talking. I'll keep sharing. I'll keep saying whatever. But not everybody does. And so am I doing it for them? Yes, absolutely.
So just that full circle moment, right? In your introduction, we talked about how you are called the taboo topics lady. And that's exactly what you're talking about here. And we need voices like that. And I think that this journey that you've shared with us really primes you for that. What happened to me after loss was all the stuff that I actually thought mattered didn't actually matter. Right? It didn't matter anymore. And so if they're going to reflect back at me their own negative bias, well, actually, that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I knew that the path that I was on was supporting me to be not only a mom to a daughter who lived in heaven, but also the best possible mom for the 2 that I got to raise here on earth, and connecting their knowledge of each other. It was very important to me that Emma Grace's existence, her spirit, who she was uniquely different and valued and respected than those of her sisters who followed. So just so many amazing themes of us developing into better versions of ourselves, us raising human beings, having a level of knowledge that a lot of people around us don't, and us looking at the soul capacity to withstand that level of grief and to just turn it into that same measure of love through action.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree.
So much. So if people are feeling, one, seen and heard, because we know the statistics around loss. And so there's a good chance a whole lot of you who are listening right now are saying, that's me. And if they want to help, how can they help?
Yeah, so they can go to our website. It's Colette Louise. So Colette is 1 L and 2 T's, Louise.com. They can reach out. I'm Michelle. I have 2 L's. My daughter has 1. At ColetteLouise.com. They can find us on social media, everything. We are always grateful for donations. We have worked it out so 100% of donations go straight to our financial assistance program. So they're going straight to helping families in need. And really our capacity to give is based on that. And so any help that we can get on that is always great, always something we really appreciate, and do this and just to follow along and to, continue the conversations and have those outside in the world, I think is really important.
Amazing. And if somebody is experiencing their darkest days right now, they can apply for support. Right,
they can apply for support on our website as well.
Yeah. Do they have to do it, or can a family member do it for them?
Family member can do it for them, and we can do this. We also require a verification. So we have a lot of social workers sometimes who will do the application with or for the family, and that is great too. We want to kind of meet people where they're at and what their capacity is at that point. And we know in trauma, there's a whole bunch of different capacities depending on what the situation is.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing a vision of your journey and your world and your beautiful family that you have here and your beautiful family that you serve there.
Yes. Thank you so much.
All right, Toddler Tribe. You know what to do, because the point of episodes like this, beyond sitting inside them and really hearing somebody else's story, is to share the word. Organizations like the Colette Lewis Foundation cannot continue to give if they don't get given to. So please share the word. This is really an important one. And yet don't think you're going to have to look too far, either in your extended family or your friend unit, to find somebody who you could donate in memory of. So stay mindful and proactive and continue in every way to transform the toddler years.